All right. So, yep, this is apparently true. I heard about this a few days ago. I thought it was fake. It seems to really be true. The California DMV is selling your data for money, and they have been doing it for years.
Yeah.
They have the records from like 2014. They sell more every year. Apparently, I don't understand how this can be legal, especially in California. And with the new California privacy law coming in effect in January, maybe something will be done about this. But that's pretty awful. I mean, they force you to give them the data, and then they sell it. Like, wait a minute. If this is not illegal, it certainly should be. Anyway, but apparently it's really happening. They got the official document from the DMV showing how much they've been doing this every year since 2014, how much money they're making. So that's disturbing. This is why I love the free press. You know, it seems to me like no part of the government is working at all in the modern age, but the free press is really working. That's why the American system has a lot of checks and balances. If you want to do something terrible in the government, there's a lot of things that will show up to hold you back. And I'm glad we still have the free press. So Sacha Baron Cohen wrote this thing here. Yeah, this is Borat, who started making fake news for comedy. Now he wants them to government to regulate social media. He's all angry at Twitter and Facebook, which, however, his argument to me makes no sense at all. He claims that we have free speech, but free speech only applies to government. So the government should force Facebook to stop spreading news. No, like, wait a minute, how does that work? Anyway, he said they're a private company. They're not subject to the First Amendment, so we should pass regulations. Of course, he kind of got a point. You can't swear on TV. He said, when I make my jokes, I have to censor them. There are rules on what you can put on media, and there's a special law exempting the internet from that. And he said they should take away that law. I've heard a lot of people say this over the last year. They should get rid of, I think, Article 520, which means the internet is exempt from laws that govern broadcast radio and TV. And maybe that would help. I'm not sure. Anyway, we'll see what happens. This is kind of amazing. 40net. I've got a bunch of 40nets. A company donated 30 40nets to me. I said I put them in my office. I got them. I was going to use them to teach the firewalls class, and that didn't happen. But what I did was I tested them and found a vulnerability right away and reported it to them. And they said they were going to fix it. In the last test, they hadn't fixed it. But I didn't catch this one. This one's even more amazing. They send your communications up to the cloud, and they just XOR it with a fixed key. So it's practically plain text. So that's pretty awesome. This is like part of my learn to go the hard way, learn to go the wrong way. You crack into XOR. Cracking XOR encryption is really easy. So that's pretty interesting. So maybe I'll have to track down one of my 40nets, see if we can get this thing going. That'd be cool to like get some real traffic and reverse it. So this one's going on back and forth, back and forth. Can the cops impound your stuff at the airport? Can they impound it at traffic stops? Can they force you to hand over your key? Apparently they could really force you to look at the retina thing or use your thumbprint, because that is considered not speech. That is like material evidence, and they're allowed to take that without your consent. The Fifth Amendment only protects you from being forced to speak against your own interests. And physical things are not considered speech. But this guy, they grabbed him for kiddie porn. They grabbed his laptop. He said, that laptop had a 64-character password, and we both know what's on there, so I'm not giving it to you. So he practically admitted that there was stuff on there. And they tried to force him to hand over the password, which previous judges have allowed, saying the password itself is not a crime, therefore the Fifth Amendment doesn't protect you. But this time, they said the password is protected by the Fifth Amendment. So, you know, this is a real thorny issue. I mean, and there are similar issues, like if you have a locked box, are you compelled to hand over the key, or this combination for safe and things like that. Anyway, so this has gone back and forth many times. It's a real thorny legal issue. And SIM swapping is really hot. All they have to do is convince a phone company that you got a new phone and you want your account moved over, which you can do with social engineering, and then they can totally get in all your accounts because you have a reset code that goes right to the phone. So that's why a lot of people are saying, even if you use two-factor authentication, you should stop using your phone as the second factor and use something else. So I'm not quite sure what else. But anyway, a lot of people are talking about that. Anyway, so here we are up to the official time. So let me say a few things about the class and the grading. A few questions have already come up. So we're not going to cover this whole book. So that's one issue. All we are going to do is chapters 1, 2, and 3, and about the first half of chapter 4. There's lecture 4A and there'll be a lecture 4B. That's all we're going to cover. There'll be quizzes on that, and the final exam will only cover that much. And it will not cover any extra stuff like the stuff about China and stuff that I had. Only the things in this main book is what's going to be on the final. This main book up here, okay. And the grades totals are up on Canvas. So you just have to get a certain number of points and then you get an A. Let me bring that up in case it's not clear to everybody. Let's see if I can find my Canvas server. It's here, good. All right, so here's my glorious Canvas server. And I should be able to go to 160. And there are final grades. There is a comment at the top. And the final grades work like this, just by the total number of points. So you need 405 for an A, 360 for a B, and so on. Now just look at your grades, you get the total, ignore the percentages, which Canvas does not calculate correctly. That's all you need. And there's still quite a bit of time to turn in stuff. We got 3 more weeks of class, so you can still turn in stuff. And the final exam is not even up yet. It's only up for the last week down here. So there's still time to accumulate more points. And today's the day when people should do their second presentation. A few people already did it early, which is worth even more. But if you do it today, it's fine. If you do it next week, it's late. All right, any questions about it? All right. Well, let me go into the lesson today, which is, as usual, a bit long and not enormously exciting, but I'm trying to slowly get into this management stuff. The problem with defense management stuff is it's hard to be, it's confusing to me. I think because I'm not used to management. Red team stuff I love. I can easily stay excited. Management stuff I'm only beginning to appreciate. I think you have to like government management. You know. Anyway, so let's talk about this. Developing your information security plan. So we'll talk about this, is the various topics here, information security programs. And so your information security program, we're going to have outcomes, charter and scope, and then information about the types of programs you can have, including the open group and Zachman Framework, which are part of it, although those are not information security architectures, those are IT architectures. And what we've got is history here. One student often says this stuff all came from the military, and it all came, after that, it came from IT frameworks. Whereas 50 years ago, many companies did not use computers at all. They just used pencil and paper, and they had business. They had Masters of Business Administration and Policies. Then computers came out and got so important that everybody had computers essential to their business. So they developed ways to integrate computers into your business. And they didn't worry about security until about 20 or 30 years later, and then they sort of tacked that on. But it's this is the plan to somehow deal with the fact that computers have all kinds of special issues they bring into your business, much more than normal staff and payroll and normal factory equipment. Computers turn out to be a lot different. So here's the 4 steps of making a program. You develop a strategy, which is your general principle of how you're going to make things secure. Then you do a gap analysis, determining how far you are from where you should be. Then you make a roadmap of steps to get there, and then you have a program to get you more secure and to continue improving. So the point of an information security program is the way you identify, communicate, and address risks. You have to define all the risks, and you have to have some organized way of dealing with them. So you've got controls, processes, and practices. And this is, if you watch TV cop shows, most of them are police procedurals. They explain how the cops respond to a call, how they gather evidence, how they handle people and suspects in interviews, how they figure out who's lying. And those are processes. You establish standard procedures, and the idea is that people do what you tell them how to do things, and that helps prevent them from making bad mistakes. The point of this is to keep your computers up and to make sure that you're controlling the risks. So this is the big message of this class and also the CISSP, and this is something that is really new as far as I can tell from red teams. I spend most of my time at red team conferences, and it's only been the last 3 years that I finally heard red teamers say this, that we are part of the business and we have to enable the business and make business run better. Until now, they've just thought of themselves as like political activists and whistleblowers. Here we are exposing the rampant corruption, and everybody, we should just be fired for doing this rotten stuff. And finally realizing, you know, that's not really productive or part of the business. Instead of screaming and yelling and expecting people to suffer, we ought to be helping people. They come to us and say, look, I want to open a new branch, and how do I do it better? If I trusted you and you were helpful instead of just screaming all the time, maybe you could help me open the new branch without it being so dangerous, and you'd understand that I can't just make it 100% secure, and maybe you could help me make a reasonable way of moderating security. And that's where, you know, this is where we're getting. So you want to be an enabler. You want to be positive and help people succeed instead of just expecting everybody to like change everything. So they say it's like the brakes on a race car. You might think a race car shouldn't have brakes, but of course they want brakes because then they can go fast until they get to the turn. They can slow down for the turn and then go fast again. So your information security program ought to be helping people do risky things and get away with it, not just stopping all forward motion. So here's the outcomes that you'll get from an information security program. And we'll go through these one by one. Strategic alignment is the big one I'm talking about, how you are going to fit security in with the rest of the organization. So this means you're going to have a relationship of trust with the rest of the business, so they will tell you about their new proposals before they implement them and let you contribute to them. That's the plan, and then you can help develop risk tolerance criteria. So the best way is if you have a committee where many stakeholders get to speak, the people who want all the people that are going to be affected, not just one person who thinks they know everything telling people what to do. Which is quite difficult. I mean, that's democracy can be very frustrating, but you have to, that's why, as far as I can tell, managers just spend their whole life going to meetings. But there's a reason for that. Anyway, so you've got risk management, and we talked about this. This is where you identify risks and you decide to treat the risks, to lower the appropriate risks, you decide which risks you're not going to treat. And that means you now can define the value delivery. This is a huge issue because security is seen as a drain on the business. It's seen as a cost center. Many businesses, IT is seen as a cost center. What we really do is make cars. And we get money by selling cars. We have to pay these irritating IT people to run a bunch of computers for no terribly good reason. And they always seem to need a bunch of money and it's just going down the drain. And then securing the computer is just even more money just going down the drain. And if we could just get rid of the IT completely, we'd have a better business as far as the manager can tell. And so you need to understand and be able to explain to the managers how it is that your security team is improving the business and making more money. It's very hard to define the return on investment in a security product. And all of this book and this plan and these certificates are trying to get to the point where we can get there. It used to work by fear, scare them. Oh, you might get hacked and then you lose $1 million. And well, that only gets you so far. In the long run, that's not enough to keep you in the business. You have to actually be able to say, we made more money because of us. And we're getting there. We're not very far down that road because we don't have any good security metrics yet. But we're beginning to be able to define the value of a security program. And ultimately, you need to have this. Now, of course, this is the really old-fashioned idea. There was once a time in the dim and distant past, like 30 years ago, when businesses actually made a profit. And you calculated the share price as like 1/50th of the annual revenue. And then Yahoo came that lost money every year, and people poured money into it. And all the traditional financial people said, what are you guys, crazy? How can you have a company where they don't earn money? What is this crap? And then all internet companies have been that way ever since. They just lose money every year and nobody seems to care because they have this faith that it'll make money later and they pour in more investment. So they're like Ponzi schemes where more investors throw in money, which they lose, and then they throw in more money, which they lose. And somehow this eventually seems to work sometimes, but getting back to the old fashioned plan, you shouldn't have anything going on in your business that doesn't actually contribute to profits. That's the old plan. And I would like to think in the long run, you have to get back to that. And this nonsense of running businesses that just lose money can't really work forever. But anyway, we're in a very strange place. Anyway, so then you've got resource management. And the idea is if your security team costs money to run, you have to pay for staff and external service providers. And so you ought to be managing them. So you're not just wasting that money. I must say the Silicon Valley culture for the last 20 years has been quite the opposite. I knew a guy that went to Yahoo, and they said they built it. Yahoo stock went up so fast they just spent all the money at swimming pools. They had playing ping pong at work. The guy came in and said, "Okay, play a game of ping pong. If you win, you're hired." That was how they did things. They would just buy companies and do nothing with them and let them die. They threw away money like crazy. Yeah.
Does that money come from the company you work at, or
it comes,
or does it come out of your pocket?
It came from investors. Yahoo was going up. Every internet stock was going up and up and up. So everybody just invested more money. So Yahoo's price went up like a factor of 10 in like 1 year. So they had a vast amount of money and no idea what to do with it. Now this happened to Amazon. Amazon was run by Jeff Bezos was a professional business consultant. So he planned to grow his business at like 5% per year. And when he started with his stock at $30, and with 1 year it went up to $200. And someone interviewed him and said, "What are you going to do? Are you going to expand and buy more business and buy more staff?" He said, "No, those people are idiots. My stock is not worth $200. It's worth $30. And I don't know why they're paying $200 for it. I'm totally ignoring that. I'm going to keep growing at 5% per year steadily. And then it crashed, and it didn't hurt him, and it hurt everybody like Yahoo that vastly expanded. And then when the internet bubble crashed, they were left out there because he knew that real value is the goods and services you produce. But the other companies were not really run by professional business people. They just said, well, if somebody's giving us a pile of money, we'll just spend it. Anyway, Amazon made it. Yahoo made it too, though. Yahoo made it because they're the only American company that succeeded in expanding into China. As far as I know, they're the only one. They bought a lot of Alibaba, and their Chinese business has totally held up their American business that has been nothing but a train wreck from the beginning. They throw money away, lose everything fails, but they're held up by China. So they did one thing right and everything else wrong, but it was a big thing. Anyway, it's a crazy world. Many internet companies survive by breaking all the rules, but these are the rules for what they're worth. And I would like to think in the long run, these rules would be the most beneficial. Yeah.
Most of the companies are they trying to make deals with China?
Oh, everybody's trying to get into China. Google tried, and Microsoft tried, everybody's tried to get into China. China is so big that you will be second rate if you don't get into China. But China is so hard to do business. They pretty much just steal everything and kick you out. You pretty much don't make a dime. The only company that succeeded is Yahoo, because Yahoo found a way to partner with an internal Chinese company and somehow retain part ownership of it. What's that?
Apple.
Yes, Apple's making money in China. That's right. So but most American companies could not figure out how to make money in China at all. They went there and had a terrible experience like Google and just left wounded and couldn't really do it. Yeah.
So only like a handful of companies like Yahoo and Apple could make money in China?
All the rest try, and they just get their products ripped off and they get kicked out of the country. What they typically do is force you to hire locals. Those locals are spies. They steal all your technology. They make a copy, and then they kick you out.
Well, aren't they doing the same thing to Apple, for example?
Apparently not. Apparently not successfully. I think Apple has such a valuable brand that it's prestigious to have a real Apple. Having a Chinese knockoff Apple is not the same. Apple's always been a luxury brand. So apparently they're actually making money. And I like to say Yahoo did it by partnering with Alibaba. They sort of managed to retain part ownership of the imitation. So it's a real puzzle how to make money in China. Most American companies have not solved that puzzle. Even very smart companies like Google can't figure out how to do it.
You gotta be kidding.
No, and they have to do it. Whoever makes it into China will rule the world. Whoever doesn't go to China is going to be miles behind forever because they have a huge market and it's growing really fast. So you can't really expand too far until you get into China. But way better. Well, their technology, I don't think their technology is better than ours, but their population is huge and they have huge wealth and they're growing really fast. However, that growth will slow in the next 5 years. And so something drastic will happen. The cynical people say China will start a war. I would like to think they might adopt a more American system. But anyway, they're going to have a huge crisis because they're hitting the natural limit of this 8% growth. Within the next 5 to 10 years, their economy is going to stop growing this fast. And everybody will freak because they're now used to this 8% growth. And they're going to think something's terribly wrong when it stops happening. That's my personal belief. I haven't heard any experts say that, but it seems inevitable to me just from the numbers. Yeah.
Do you think the upcoming global recession is going to cause that to slow down their annual growth?
I think they will interpret it as a global recession. If their growth was to slow down to 2% like ours, they would interpret that as like a disaster. But I think they can't keep growing this fast because they're hitting the natural limit of how much wealth you can possibly produce. So, but they've had like 30 years of 8% growth, so that's what they expect. And I think that cannot be sustainable from a macroeconomic level. Of course, I must say, I studied macroeconomics long ago, and the internet, Silicon Valley companies kind of blew that away. So a lot of people totally ignore these rules and get away with it for far longer than you might think, although you would think they can't get away with it forever. Like cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are a pile of money, no value at all, no product that's worth anything at all, and just a pile of money pouring into it. An endless ton of people convinced it's the end of it's saving the world, and you should just throw more money into it. I keep saying this bubble has to burst. It hasn't really burst yet. So, I don't see any reason for any of those digital currencies to exist. but a lot of people really believe it. Several experts believe they overstate their growth numbers. Well, that's another interesting possible. That could be, I suppose. Anyway, so anyway, you got performance management of your company. So you have to measure your activities to make sure things are operating correctly. And then you have your assurance process, where you make sure that your information security aligns with other businesses and therefore other parts of the business. So you have to help these businesses be less insecure, like your HR and finance and operations and so on. They all have information security issues now. Your HR has got all the personal data of your employees and they have to protect it. So this is why, rather than being the angry complainer in the company, you really ought to be friends with people and helping people and partnering with people, because everybody needs you to help lower their information risk. And if you're a friendly person that's helpful instead of an angry person, yeah.
Like legal, audit, and risk management and operations compared to before, they used to not communicate, right? And they used to not care about security. All of them have an old-fashioned procedure from the days of when everything was written on paper and locked in a vault in a safe. And they really only reluctantly went to computers, and many of them are still pretty clueless about security. But now everybody's getting hacked and ransomware and freaking out. So they would all really love having a security team that they could work with, that would help them fix what they need to fix without like giving them a bad attitude, calling them stupid, telling them to make ridiculous changes they can't make. Everybody would like a consultant to come in and say, look, what can I do to be safer from where I am that wouldn't totally disrupt my life? And there's probably something they can do, even if they have a lot of bad practices, they could probably make it better, even if they can't make it perfect. It's like a doctor, you know, you go to the doctor, he says, you got to lose weight, you got to quit smoking, you got to quit drinking, you got to sell your motorcycle. They're like, well, I'm going to find a different doctor. I don't want to do all that. So you got to find a doctor that will compromise with you and help you make reasonable changes, you know. So there's a charter. Now, the charter is the document that gives you the right to run your information security program. So it specifies the funding, the names of the leaders and managers, and the names of people that approved it. If you don't have this, then you're not getting anywhere. And this is a big thing in the CISSP exam. They say, don't even bother trying to improve security at a company unless you have C-level buy-in. Somebody up at CIO, CEO, CSO, somebody up there has to really support what you're doing, because it's going to be expensive. And you can't do it from the bottom. You have to have support from the top of the organization, because they have to be willing to spend money and allocate resources and force people to go to meetings and fill out reports and stuff. And if they're not on board with it, it's going nowhere. You're just going to frustrate yourself. So that's the point. You have to have this charter, which gives you the authority to do things. And then you got to function. So you got to make a policy, make a risk management process, perform security governance, which is controlling all these activities to make sure that you're actually lowering the risk. And then you have to implement controls. And so you'll have to implement vulnerability management, where you discover your vulnerabilities and patch them. Incident response, control your third-party risk is a huge one. The student I know that just got a job in compliance is horrified to discover that people have just been subscribing to cloud services and sending company data there and letting them log in all over the place without even keeping track of it. So you don't even know how many other people can get in. This is pretty common. That's third-party risk. You know exactly who else are you trusting, and you know how well do we know these people. That's why, I mean, I always use throwaway passwords on most sites, because I know what idiots they're throwing it away. I don't give you the same password everywhere, because you're trusting all those people with your stuff, and a lot of them are sloppy with it. Okay, and then you've got these other considerations like business continuity planning, and security awareness training is now required by almost everywhere. I got another contract recently with a large government organization, and I found out that to achieve compliance, they'd taken about 80 business units, and they decided they needed to claim that each business unit had a security manager. So they just took random people who don't know anything and told them, you're now the security manager. No training, no pay, no nothing. Like some random secretary is now also the security manager, and they give them some form to fill out about security, and they don't even know what it is. But now they claim, we have security managers at our locations, even though they don't know anything. This kind of thing happens a lot. So that's like point of security awareness training, to have some level of security awareness throughout the company. And this is what Kevin Mitnick does. Basic security awareness training. He sort of has like a magic show where he turns on a Wi-Fi pineapple and steals some passwords out of the air. But it counts as corporate security awareness training, and they want to check that box. Yes, we gave people professional recognized security awareness training. It's a big market.
Is this for like a government thing?
Government and corporations, so they can achieve compliance. It's one thing, many people, and to pay their cyber risk insurance and stuff, many people have to have security awareness training. And it's really, and so there are various companies providing it. And one of their big concerns is to make it like fun. So they make it like a magic show.
No, I'm just thinking if it's somebody that doesn't know anything about security, like you just said.
Yeah.
When I was thinking the liability of, especially in the government environment.
Yes.
The problems you can endure personally.
Yeah, this is litigation. I mean, people have to achieve compliance, and they do it by just fake measures often. And then, of course, if they have an incident and they get sued, then you could claim that they have fraudulently obtained compliance and try to see how far that gets you. From what I've heard, the rules are also vague, that it's pretty hard to punish them for that. Anyway, so the point is it's a team sport. You have the security charter, but you can't just give people orders. Instead, you have to guide them and you have to have relationships with people so they will value your advice. You must make yourself valuable to the other parts of the business or they won't listen to you. And ultimately, the executive leaders at the top and the board of directors are responsible for everything. The security manager is just working under their directions. So then you have to define the scope of it. Of course, you have to figure out what part of the business you're trying to secure. This must be finite or you'll go mad. There's a general problem with all IT called scope creep, where you start doing something and they say, oh, while you're at it, do this. While you're at it, do that. While you're at it, do that, until suddenly it's too big and you've lost control. So you have to avoid that. And so there are frameworks out there. These are business process models, and they're based on risk. So there's 3 security management frameworks that are popular. The ISO 27000, you hear about all the time, COBIT from ISACA, and the one from the US government, NIST Cybersecurity Framework. These are the 3 big ones. And so this is the international standard. And so it's just got processes, risk assessment, how to develop controls, and how to do things like vulnerability management and incident management. They all accomplish approximately the same thing. Then there's COBIT from ISACA. Of course, the people who make the certification this book is on, the CISM, and it's got these standards for managing an IT organization and having controls, the usual stuff. And then there's NIST from the US government, developed in 2014 to have a US government standard, National Institute Standard, cybersecurity framework. All of these do approximately the same thing. And I got a few Kahoots about that. Let me bring them up in my browser that can run Kahoot. See if I've got the glorious Kahoot music. Okay. I should get a place to put the answers. Okay. Okay. Well, I'll give it a few more seconds. 6 may be all we have. Yeah, not very many online. Pretty much all in the classroom today. All right. Oh, well, that'll be next time. Actually, you can still join late. Anyway, so which outcome includes establishing trust? That's your strategic alignment. All right, good. Which one came from ISACA, the Security Management Framework? That's COBIT. The ISO is an international one, 27001. All right. Which outcome includes effectively using your staff. All right, that's resource management. All right, here. And what's the formal written document that names the leaders and the managers? Okay, that's the charter. All right, so it's going to make a to-do about the winners. So, MDOT, all right. And Orange Man's going to have to tell me who they are if they want their points. And Cap, I think that's a real name. You're Orange Man?
No, I'm Cap. I'm on.
You're Orange Man. Good. Okay. Good. All right. I will put a note here. All right. Good. We know who MDOT is. That'll do. Good. So let's go on to the next one. Let me close this noisy thing, although they certainly put some effort into making it more fun. Anyway, so, all right. So, yeah, well, they're trying to make it, they're trying to increase the price and everything. So, you know, well, you know, they got to make a business. It's been free for like 5 years and I use them a lot. So it bothers me that I'm not paying them money. I'm a filthy American capitalist. If I'm not paying someone money and nobody's paying them money, I have this feeling they won't be around very long. I have this old fashioned concept, like what's in your book, that you actually have to make money. Anyway, so you define a roadmap. These are the steps to get you there. And so there's going to be tasks and projects to lower your risk. And so you've got enterprise architecture, which is a business function and a technical model. These are activities that make sure that important business needs are met by IT, and you have a model. So these are enterprise architecture frameworks that explain how your business is done by the IT, not particularly pointing to security. Now, information security architecture is something you add to enterprise architecture, which goes into protecting it, because originally they just had computers built into business, and then later on they worry about the security of those computers. So now you've got to worry about the protective characteristics and parts of your architecture, and you've got to consider the components that provide these preventive or detective security functions. So what you're trying to do is ensure that all your hardware and software works to accomplish a business goal. That works well together, there's consistency and efficiency, that it's scalable and flexible. This is a huge thing. If you take your Network Plus, they talk about this. This is even, I think, on the exam. If you have 10 users, should you buy a 12-port switch or a 24-port switch? And you have to buy a 24-port switch because you expect growth to double like every year. So scalable is huge. If your business is a success, it will grow, and whatever you're doing has to scale to the future. This is why I was talking before class about teaching advanced topics at a community college is kind of insane, because there really isn't the institutional support to do it. So it's logically not sustainable and scalable because we're not really tooled up to teach this sort of thing. It is something crazy people do occasionally, but it involves a whole lot of people doing unpaid work and going to training they pay for themselves. Is not, you know, it's logically not here. And that's what you do. You can do things briefly that are far outside what you're actually prepared for, but you can't sustain them. Anyway, and then that's the game here, ways to upgrade things and maintain them as part of it. So you got two layers. You got policy and standards. Your policy is general rules of what you're going to do. Like we will have centralized authentication and web filtering. And then your standards are specific details of exactly which products you will use. Like we will use this vendor, we will set it up this to set these rules to harden our devices and so on. Those are the two layers of it. So centralized functions are a huge thing. This is why Microsoft makes so much money. They make Active Directory domain controllers, and they're ultimately essential. If you have a Microsoft network like in this room, and you have a bunch of computers, you can put like Windows 10 on the computers and use them. In here, they don't have any logins. They all have the same account. But if it was a business, they'd have a personal login on each machine. And if one machine broke, you wouldn't be able to use the next person's machine because it wouldn't know who you are. And if we fired somebody, we wouldn't be able to update all the machines to take their account off, so they'd still have a way in it. And if we had a software update, we'd have to carry around a floppy to update every, or
CD or something to update each one, and some of them wouldn't get updated, and pretty soon you've got a mess. So instead of, Microsoft says as soon as you have 10 computers, you should have a domain, a central server controlling all that, so you can control all the authentication, all the permissions, push out the updates. And that, it turns out to be incredibly important to have everything centralized. So you have one central point of control for a lot of things. And this is how you can have one administrator administer hundreds of thousands of machines. One central, all they have to do is set the rules on the domain controller, and that will control the whole enterprise. And you want to control everything, the phones, the tablets, the payment sent terminals, the wireless access points, the firewalls, everything should be there. So you got Active Directory and LDAP, which Microsoft uses. You have centralized monitoring. Instead of having logs on every device, you have to forward those logs to a central point, and then you've got something like Splunk showing you all the logs of everything that matters in one place. If you don't have that, you can't really discover problems and track them down. Then you've got to control all your devices, workstations, mobile devices, network devices. So you set up things like LAN desk, and you push out security settings and required software and rules from one central place. That's why people pay a lot for that stuff. So here's two enterprise frameworks, TOGAF and Zachman. These are enterprise architecture models. They are not particularly security models. These came before people cared about security. So TOGAF is the open one, and it's got a life cycle architecture framework for designing, planning, and governing. And so it's got a graph coming up here, phases, preliminary, vision, setting up the architecture, and then requirements management. And here's the plan. You have preliminary setup, then you have requirements management, and you have all these things that go around in a circle. So you have a vision of the architecture, then you build it out, and then you have opportunities and solutions coming down here. And so then you have migration and changes to deal with the changes, and then you go around the loop, around and around, and it's all managed from a central point. So you have rollout of new features and new devices and all controlled. That's the plan. And this is what I've seen it work well and poorly. For example, this college, there was a big rollout of new computers about 10 years ago that was very well done. And then there was a rollout of a new banner server about a year ago that was very badly done. You can compare the two and see what happens. Then the Zachman Framework is still dominant today from the 80s. This was in the early days of everybody being computerized. So it's how to add IT to a business. And so you have scope and various models here, like the technology and systems model. And then the other way, you have data and people, network and functional stuff, and then matters of time and strategy. So you consider all these things, and it has to address the same issue, that the technology adds to all different parts of the business, and you have to keep updating the technology and have waves of change go through here, and you have to have consideration of all these terms to avoid losing control of your technology as it goes forward. And this, of course, comes from all the hard lessons of everybody that computerized their stuff and then found out after a while that there were problems and it didn't really help and you ended up in trouble. These are all the things you have to consider to keep control of your technology and end up not wasting too much money on it. So anyway, so you got to implement a security architecture. At the enterprise level, you got a policy and governance and big changes. And at the detail level, you have things like configuration and change management. These are firewall settings, updates, things like that. So if you decide to upgrade your DNS infrastructure, then you'll have to consider what other consequences there are. This is why you have change management. Somebody thinks, I'll just change this one thing, it won't matter. At Facebook, they're proud of this. They say, move fast and break things, change anything you want. All you do, if you want to make a new feature at Facebook, is you just put it on an internal bulletin board where somebody can look at it. Usually nobody does look at it, and they push it out right away after a week of being on the bulletin board if nobody complains, but they don't push it out to the whole world. They push it out to like just one town. So a few thousand people see it, and then they see if there's trouble. If there's no trouble, they attribute it more widely because they want to maintain a developing culture where everybody can just have a good idea and throw it out there, and you don't have to like wait for a lot of approval from boards or stodgy people. You have a great idea. It's exciting for the developers. That's Facebook's plan. They call it move fast and break things. Uber had the same plan. And also the guys with those little scooters, Bird, they would just move into a town, blast the stuff in there, ignore all the rules, break the law, and say, oh, we'll deal with the consequences later. And Uber had a long period of success that way. Now they seem to be in big trouble. Bird the same, but this is one way to go. This is the opposite here. This is the old-fashioned system where you actually plan things and control things and don't just smash things.
This is the standard business way of doing things. Yeah.
Is Uber just in trouble with a few states? Or
Oh no, they're running out of money. They're actually sinking.
Yeah, London just.
They're expected to go broke pretty soon. It's amazing. They had huge growth by just smashing into companies, but then a few years later, everybody started kicking them out and taxing them and putting lawsuits on them and everything. And eventually the bill came due for all that damage, and they don't seem to have been able to adapt to being a more normal, respectful company fast enough to catch up with all the hatred they built up by just smashing into everything.
So they're getting in trouble with the higher, like the federal level type.
And states. Oh, and people blocked them from the airport. France kicked them out of the country. A lot of people had it. Yeah, a lot of people, say, we don't need you idiots. We would rather just have normal taxi drivers that get paid a proper wage, and you could just take your Uber, go somewhere else, And they're trying to not be responsible for the drivers, like killing people and not being insured and stuff. And people say, we don't really need you idiots here. We'll go back to taxi cabs. Anyway, so we'll see how it all goes. That's the move fast and break things of the Silicon Valley ethos, largely imitating Uber, but that only goes so far. Anyway, so then there's a lot of changes. For example, everything is software-defined networking now. The servers are virtual, the routers are virtual, the firewalls are virtual. So everything is really virtual. The network traffic is all virtual. And of course, all your devices are virtual. And then you got microservices moving towards the new serverless infrastructure. Instead of having one server that does something, you break it up into several little pieces and you run each of them in its own container, and little chunks talk to each other that way. And this, of course, will make certain things more efficient and stable and scalable, but it's a new way of meeting. So that's the thing that drives everybody nuts, including the college, is the fact that everything keeps changing so fast in technology. So you don't really have time to stabilize. You have to keep changing everything. Whatever you're doing a couple of years from now, nobody cares about that anymore. You got to have the new hotness. So somehow you have to have a lot of training. That's why Google gave everybody 1 day a week to do their own stuff. So everybody spends 20% of their time training to learn something new. That is probably the most realistic way to cope with it. You have to have people that love this stuff and that will want to learn new stuff, and they're constantly learning new stuff, because if they don't keep learning new stuff after just a couple of years, they're obsolete and not helpful. Anyway, then you got security program management. I'm going to do a little bit of this part. A lot of topics here. We're just going to do some of the security governance in this one, and all the rest of this stuff will come in later lectures or whatever I can fit in the next class, which is the last lecture from this book in this class. And yeah.
Next week's the last class?
No, it isn't. Next week is the last lecture. The week after that, I have a guest lecture. And then comes the final. Okay. 2 more classes. Anyway, so these are management activities. That's what security governance is. These are the management activities that control your risk. They establish roles and responsibilities and measure processes to limit the risk in your business. So you have a board of directors, establish the tone of the company, general pronouncements like the 10 Commandments, not very detailed, but general directions you're going, like Google has a mission statement to index all the world's information, which is why they're intrinsically opposed to privacy. They're supposed to find all the data in the world and index it so you can find it on Google. That's their primary mission. Anyway, so then you have a steering committee, hopefully, your information security steering committee, and then a CISO, you have audit staff, a CIO at a lower level, and management, and then all employees under that. So the board of directors establish the grand general direction of it all and are ultimately responsible for everything. That's why, the board of directors kicked Steve Jobs out of Apple. Steve Jobs was running Apple. He was the visionary. He was the founder and the leader, but then he made a lot of really bad decisions, like making some piece of junk called the Lisa that nobody wanted and spending a lot of money on a series of really horrible computers. So the board of directors kicked him out. They can vote the CEO out of the business, saying, you are losing stock price, you're a lunatic, we're going to put somebody else in. They can't do that to Facebook, because Mark Zuckerberg changed the voting structure of the stock so the stockholders can never have more stock than he does. So he has 51%, so no one can ever vote him out. But Steve Jobs had the old-fashioned model before anybody thought of that, and he actually lost his own company when the board of directors got mad enough at him. So your steering committee contains stakeholders from all over the business, and these establish the operational strategy. And they set the roles and responsibilities, and they make sure that the strategy matches the IT and the business overall. That's why you need to have a committee with stakeholders from business units, so everybody gets to make sure that your security
strategy is not messing up any part of the business too much. That's where you have to make reasonable compromises so people can still do their work. The classic security problem is the person does something irritating, like make you change your password to something complicated every 90 days or 30 days. So it makes everybody crazy. So they all do something stupid, like put their password on a Post-it. It's this kind of thing you get when ineffective, when you don't have a committee and you make stupid decisions that in fact mess up other parts of the company too much. Anyway, then you got the CISO. This guy develops the security policy, does risk assessments, and develops processes to do the essential activities like phone management, identity management. Identity management is huge, keeping track of who people are all over the place, and the other things like compliance and security awareness. And then you got audits. You have to use periodic audits. Well, audits got to be done, and there's a whole CISA, which we never taught here yet. Although Richard Booth is ready to teach it, there's been so much chaos in the college, we haven't been able to. But we do want to have a CISA to be a very valuable cert for people to get. It's an important job where if you're the auditor, you have to set up systems to get regular reports from people so you can meet compliance audits, the most common type. And you have to have periodic audits to make sure things are working. So then you got the CIOs. These guys do the IT strategy and maintain the operations and service desk to keep the machines working. And then you got management that manages groups of people for specific business purposes. And they're, of course, responsible for the conduct of their employees. And all the employees have to comply with the security policy. And this is why you have to have security awareness training so they are aware of how to be reasonably secure. And everybody in the whole company is required to be compliant with the policies of management. And then there's a reason for security governance. Everybody's dependent on their IT systems, and if you don't control them, you will end up with a mess. Negligence and breaches, disasters, outages. So you've got a lot of activities and results that come from risk management, incident response, disaster recovery, planning, and then effectiveness measurement and resource management. So hopefully you have increased trust from everybody. If you do this right, all the people that deal with you trust you more because you actually have a good security strategy. I think Microsoft is now in this position. Microsoft used to be laughed at by the world about 15 years ago, around the time of Office 2000. Their stuff was garbage. They were getting hacked all the time, and they realized it and shaped up, and now they are considered a leader and a model of security software development and programs, and many people look up to them. They turned the corner and achieved this, I think, where many people see them as the leaders in many security roles. So we got the last cahoots. All right.
Let's see.
This should be over on the right. It's best around here. I should have this thing somewhere. There we go. All right. All right, we got more people now. That's all right. Are there any more people coming in? Did you get him back there? Okay, good, good. All right. What's that? What I have? There's Kahoot.it is the one to go to. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway. All right. Well, I guess we'll go ahead. All right. So, what personnel verify that selected systems are operating properly? Okay, that's audit people. That's what they do. They measure to make sure things are up to a certain standard and report on that. All right. What technique performs a task using multiple independent containers?
That's called microservices. It's beyond virtualization. This is the new hotness. Yep. All right. And which framework was developed in the 80s? Which is a really long time ago. That's the Zachman Framework. And which one of these would name specific vendors? All right, that's your standards. Standards define it.
Not that one.
Good. Well, let's see who won. I've got Carrie. Okay, good. And MDOT again. And
Sorry for the vulgarity.
Hey Trump. Oh, is that you?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
Hey, Trump, doctor.
All right. Well, good. All right, so those things. Now, there may be some people that wish to give talks today. Let me stop this recording. I'll leave the share going. And